Firstly, I'd like to thank North Central Catchment Management Authority for allowing me to come and be your guest speaker this afternoon. The other is I would like to acknowledge another colleague of mine from the Loddon Shire, Brian Hinnenberg, who is up the back as well. I also work with Brian as well. What I'm going to tell you this afternoon isn't rocket science, and the people that are in this room are clever farmers and have built this region. So. But what I am going to give you an insight into is a little bit about how I got involved and what we're doing, and lots of other elements through the half an hour. I'm going to actually talk for around about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to show you a little DVD that fills in the concept of what we're doing within our region. But there's a few things that I just want to ask the audience before I actually start, and I want you to think about this as I'm doing my presentation today. How many of us in this audience like to dream? So is there lots of us that like to dream? Okay. How many people in this audience today have a value-adding idea on their farm? How many people have a value-adding idea? Okay. All right. How many people in the audience like to work in partnership? So how many people like to work in partnership? Okay. What I want to say to you today, tourism doesn't happen without working together, and especially in rural environments. That's one thing I do really want to emphasise, that it doesn't just happen. So I'm actually going to give you a little bit of an insight into myself, growing up in a rural environment, how I got involved in what I do today, and how I'm with the Loddon Shire Council, because the whole element, the Loddon Shire Council element's probably purely by accident, but now I do work in the tourism field, and we are going from strength to strength. Just a little bit about my background. I'm a tomato and grape picker by trade. That's where I started, and a machinist, and I'm a yuki cutter. So I actually produce eucalyptus oil and still do today, and still do strongly as a volunteer. So I'm not a person that came out of university, sits in an office and thinks that I know. I still don't know, I'm still learning, but I do know that you can, if you actually put in your mind that you want to achieve something, you can do that. And that's what I've done in my life as a child growing up. So I just really, really want to emphasise that. So I will start from the beginning. When I was 15 years of age, I said to my father I wanted to leave school. And Dad said to me, the only way you'll get out of those school doors is if you get a job. Back in my rural community of Wedderburn back then, they had industry that looked after young people like myself that didn't wish to go to tertiary education and want to live and work in a rural environment and be a labourer. And so as soon as Dad said to me, as long as I got a job, I could leave school, I pushed the school doors open and down to our clothing industry called Gavoni Mills. Gavoni Mills operated in Wedderburn for over 25 years. I started there in 1985. Sadly, in 1989, Gavoni came into Wedderburn, said, we're really sorry, we've got to close your factory down and move it overseas. It's a sign of the times when we're going to see a big change in the textile industry, which we've all seen today. If you could visualise, this clothing industry employed 40 to 45 girls. They came in from around about a 50-kilometre radius every day into Wedderburn to work. So they came from other rural environments. They came from areas like Serpentine, Inglewood, Bridgewater, Witchyproof, Charlton, St Arnaud, all other rural environments, but they just didn't work there. They went to the newsagents, they went to the supermarket, they went to the chemist. They used to spend their dollar within the community. When the factory closed, we all had to disperse and go elsewhere. I came over to Boort and worked for the Lanyon family on the tomato industry. I used to pick their red tomatoes that once upon a time used to go down to for canning and tomato sauce down into Dandenong. When I finished there, I'd move on to Bridgewater, and I worked for a family of the name of Cummingses, picking their grapes to produce their water wheel wine. When you start moving out of your rural environment for work, you start doing your necessities. So if you could visualise that clothing industry that was in Wedderburn, that closed down, and we all had to disperse, that dollar that helped us survive and prosper wasn't there anymore. Now, I just want to make sure that as I go through this, I'm actually going through a process to get to our end element, and I do get into other areas, but I really do need to start with the Wedderburn element. So the clothing industry did close, as I said, and we all had to disperse and go elsewhere. So Wedderburn was one of many rural communities that went through a severe decline from around about 1989 right through to around about 1996. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the community of Wedderburn that I live in and then I'll go further into this development. So in 1989, we lost our clothing industry. 1990, we lost our hospital. 1992, our motel closed down. 1993, our supermarket closed down. Keeping in mind, we were situated on the Calder Highway around halfway between Melbourne and Mildura. I can honestly say to this group of the people here today, I've never been unemployed. I hope that I never will be. But I was working in Horsham in the mid-90s. I was going to be returned home to my community of Wedderburn to live, and I was working in the textile trade over there. I was going to return back to Wedderburn to live. I truly believe there is anything better than bringing your children up in a rural environment. But when I returned home to my community to live, I thought to myself, there is no way known I'm going to sit in this rural environment and wish the government would give us this and wish the government would give us that. Number one, I truly believe that they shouldn't have to. But number two, and these are purely only my thoughts, that sometimes I think the government don't know it's happening in their big offices without a back block of Wedderburn with 800 people. So I thought to myself, I'm not going to sit in this rural environment. I'm going to contribute to my rural environment, and so I did. So a group of us actually bound together and started turning our negatives into positives. A person of the name of Jeff Burnside had been involved in the poultry industry in Wedderburn for many years. And there was a big change in the poultry industry, and Jeff and a group of gentlemen went out looking for an industry known as turf engineering today. They make rollers for bowling clubs. So any bowlers that are in the room or retired bowlers, they make rollers for bowling clubs. And so Jeff and the group of gentlemen went out and had a look, because the biggest export out of a rural environment are our youth. And we had to look at ways of how we were going to keep our youth in a rural environment that wanted to live and work there. So as I said, the gentlemen went out, they found an industry, now we have turf engineering. Wedderburn doesn't have a hospital, but it has a great hospital in Inglewood, it has a great hospital in Boort, but anything major, we have to go to Bendigo, anything major, we have to move on to Melbourne. But something we do have, which is very special, is a community emergency response team. They are 24 volunteers trained as ambulance drivers, not as paramedics. So if anyone has a heart turn in our community, someone will ring 000. 000 will then connect into the ambulance, which will then connect into the community emergency response team. There's one now in Wedderburn, there's one in Boort, there's one in Pyramid Hill, there's one in Birchip. It's all about putting that infrastructure back into rural environments. Myself, how I got involved in the tourism industry, my father worked on the Shire of Coorong all his life until he retired. Dad had a hobby on weekends of making blue mallee eucalyptus oil. Dad had 3 girls. I was the last. I was meant to get Ricky. I got Robyn, but I've always been Dad's boy. And still today, I'm still my father's boy. And every weekend I'd go out with my father, we'd collect the leaf, we'd bring the leaf in to process blue mallee eucalyptus oil. The last family member who actually owned the factory, because my father never owned it, said to Robbie, it's about time I called it a day. And I was standing there, this was around about 1997, going into 1998. Said to my father, Robbie, it's about time I called it a day. I'm standing there and I said to Eric, what are you going to do with this old distillery? You're just not going to let another part of history slip by. And Eric said to me, Robyn, if you want it, you can have it. And I thought, I'm going to have it, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. My husband and I took a trip over to Tasmania. We were travelling around Tasmania in a camper van, 1998, travelling around in a camper van, looking at all historic sites, cottage industries, how farmers had value added over in Tasmania. And I said to my husband, we have the same opportunities in our own backyard in Central Victoria, but everyone is so busy looking after their little patch. We're not really promoting what produce we're producing in Central Victoria. We're not promoting what we're doing in our rural environments. I thought, when I come home from Tassie, I'm going to show this distillery to people, but I'm going to bring other people on board. Now, I want you to keep in mind, this program was started myself as a volunteer. This program also, when this program was started, I was a motel cleaner and also working in a supermarket as it progressed. So when I did come home from Tasmania, I put together this little day tour of Wedderburn. And this little day tour consisted of the eucalyptus, the Coach House Museum, the Melville Caves, the pistachios, the eating we can't forget, and I'll put it into a nice little flyer form. I sent it off with around about an hour and a half's radius of Wedderburn, and it went to areas like Woodend, Kyneton, Naddymuck, Horsham, Echuca, Swan Hill, but I had to market it very differently because I couldn't hope that one day someone might drive in and come and see this eucalyptus distillery in the Wichita Flora and Fauna Reserve. I thought to myself, I have to look at how I'm going to market it. So I thought, what I'm going to do is tunnel this into groups. So I attentioned it to tour conveners of groups, and the people that would be interested in this started to drill into the 50+ market. So I sent it off to areas. So I sent it off to organisations like Probus clubs, Masonic Lodge social clubs, legacy clubs, etc. I started to spark some interest. I was still cleaning at the Wedderburn Motel. I had an agreement with them. If I was able to attract people to Wedderburn, I could have the day off and tour guide them around. The day had come, I'd have the day off, I'd tour guide them around. At the end of my time with them, people would say to me, Robyn, we travel from Woodend to Mildura, pass right through your area. We didn't even realise this was happening. Or we go from Echuca over to Horsham, pass right through your area, didn't even realise this was happening. At the same time I started dabbling in this little day tour, we also had those huge shire amalgamations. And we actually amalgamated 4 shires into one and became what is now known today as the Loddon Shire. The Loddon Shire is 6,700 square kilometres with a population of 8,000 people, and farming dominates the area. And it brings in rural country communities like Pyramid Hill, Bort, Dingy, Serpentine, Inglewood, Bridgewater, Tarnagulla, Lanakuri, Eddington, Newbridge. They're all rural communities with 800 people and less. When this amalgamation took place, believe me, it wasn't too pleasant, because there was one shire office for the 6,700 square kilometres, and I'm going to be honest, if Wedderburn hadn't got that shire office in that town, they would have been in quite dire straits. So they were very lucky to obtain that shire office. But when the amalgamation took place, my mind started to boggle. I thought, I've been able to do this little day tour around Wedderburn. I'd love to go through and inspect this whole region. So I made an appointment, and I will say this to you, I had a phobia of men in suits. Any man that I used to see in a suit, I used to worry about. But I made an appointment to see the Chief Executive Officer of the Loddon Shire. I went in, I sat down with him, and I showed him all the people that had been and to come to Wedderburn over a 12-month period, where they'd come from, how many people were, and I said, all as I want from this council is support. And of course, what does the CEO say, and what supports that? And I explained to him that when I go out and inspect, you can instill some confidence in what I'm trying to do. So I went out and inspected the whole of the Loddon Shire. The Loddon Shire starts 14 kilometres out of Maldon, and back then we had Aussie wool quilts down in the southern part. Now it's in the northern part. We had the Loddon Miniature Steam Trade at Eddington, the Wire Works at Inglewood, the Simply Green Tomatoes at Bort, the Salt at Pyramid Hill. The list went on. It just didn't mean inspecting tourist attractions. It meant inspecting roads. It meant inspecting bridges. Because in the early days, they made a lot of 12-tonne bridges in rural environments, and you couldn't put them over a 12-tonne bridge if you had a large coach, because the front might get over and the back might not. You had to plan your routes. I'd done an audit on those wonderful places we all don't like stopping at, and that's public toilets, and I'd done an audit on public toilets right through Loddon. After I'd gone through and I'd inspected, I put together, and if anyone wants to take examples away of this today, you're more than welcome. This is only a photocopy of some of our stuff. I put a book together, a booklet of day tours. After I put it all together, I had another meeting with the CEO. I sat down with him and we went through it all. I then had an evening with the councillors, and the councillors all went through it. At the end of my time with the councillors, back then in those days, one of the councillors stood up and said, Robyn, I'm really embarrassed. And he said, why? And I said, I didn't even realise this was in our backyard myself. Then they started asking me lots of questions. They said, Robyn, how are you going to market this? And I said, well, I'll tell you how I'm not going to market it. I'm not going to send off flyers and brochures and all that literature, because we're not the Great Ocean Road, we're not Swan Hill, we're not Echuca, we're not Bendigo, we're not Maldon. We are rural environments. We have to get off our backside and go and tell people what we're doing in rural environments. Tell people what we're doing in rural environments. And so the councillors sorry, I lost my train of thought. So then the councillors from there, they said to me, well, Robyn, how are you going to do it? And I said, well, very easy. On my school reports, it said Robyn was very enthusiastic but talks too much. So I thought what I'm going to do is put that to good use. In 2000, I did start my own small business, and it was known as Loddon Discovery Tours, and it was operating absolutely beautiful. I would conduct tours, group tours in winter, in autumn and spring, and go out and guest speak in summer and winter. And when I talk about guest speak, I would go and speak to Probus clubs. So I'd go and speak to them in Melbourne and New South Wales and Adelaide, places like that. But in 2003, it all come to a halt. And in 2003, my public liability renewal came in, and my public liability went from 700 to 3,000. There was never an accident. In 2003, there was quite a crisis in public liabilities, and my husband always called this a hobby. He's told me I was following a passion, and but I could not get enough people through the doors for this to stay sustainable for my family. So I was still the cleaner at the motel, and I was still a part-time worker at a supermarket, and some of the operators went and spoke to council and said to council about how beneficial this program has been to the region. So I actually had a meeting with the councillors, and to cut a long story short, the council actually decided to employ me for 25 hours a week. In May 2003, I became an employee of the Loddon Shire. In May 2003, I became an employee of the Loddon Shire Council. But believe me, this whole role exceeded a lot more than 25 hours a week. But I was very honoured to be given the opportunity to follow a passion that I love. In 2005, council asked me, council actually asked me, when I go out and guest speak, what did we want? We had to build on fitting into that piece of Victoria, so the jigsaw into the piece of Victoria, so that we've done that. So this booklet travels all the way around, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And if anyone wants to take one of these away today, you're more than welcome. In 2005, I became a full-time employee of the Loddon Shire, and my role, we actually specialise in group tours, and what we do is we put together tours of 2 night, 3 days, day tours right through to 4 night, 5 days, and we tour guide them around the Shire, going to all different value adds that have occurred on farm, also going to community organisations that have developed tourism attractions, etc. through the area. The other is we have a visitor centre, so we also do a lot of marketing through that. Now, with the Loddon Discovery Tours program, if anyone is actually thinking of value adding on their farm, okay, and I will show you a DVD, you can, with value adding, you have a look. Loddon Shire, for an example, accommodation. People say to us all the time, build motels, build this, build that. That's not the market that's coming into the Shire. The market that's coming into the Shire are people that require, they're self-sufficient. So they want their cabin, or they want a self-contained area where they can cook their meals and do all that sort of thing. Value adding on farm. Land care, for an example. I can see that with even a land care project around the area, you could actually develop a land care tour through the area and target it into group areas. There's lots of ways that you can tell other people what you are doing in society, but you've got to believe in it, and you've got to follow what you do. A lot of people, and I've put it, there's a couple of things that I've put for tourism to work and value adding. Don't do it alone. You need to communicate with people, and you need to have a look at your market. So if you were going to do accommodation, you need to have a look at it. If you were going to do canoeing on Serpentine Creek, or you're going to do it on the Loddon River, start from the beginning. Find out, do your business plan, think about the permits that you need, and work through it. But you don't have to do it alone. There's people within local government organisations that can put us in the right direction to be able to head in the right direction to be able to achieve our end result. The other is what's really important. What I find in tourism, people actually work in their business, and what I mean by that, in their business they do their cleaning and they do all those activities that normally need to happen. A lot of people start a business, they put all this money into their business. And what happens? They get to the end dollar and they don't have anything at all for marketing. You need to start. You need to start gradually. And a great example of that, and I know that she's up in the room today, is Marilyn from Simply Tomatoes. From when Simply Tomatoes started today, Back when I started in 2000, right through to today, they started small and they grew, but they grew. They just didn't keep adding and adding. They actually grew. They grew their business. The other part is you need to make sure and work on your business, and that is the most important on it. Customer service, your marketing, your web, and when I talk about your websites, all that sort of thing, you need to do that. And there are people out there that can also actually help you do that. The other is, while I'm here, if there's people in the region, Loddon Shire's got a their Grow, Build, Invest and Create brochure, if anyone wants to take that away with them today. All right, so to think about that. There's also a DVD. Now, this went down to the Rural Living Expo in Melbourne, so please take that with you. There's also a DVD as well on that as well. So the value adding on your farm isn't what you need to do. Think about what you would like to do. If it's jams, think about it and how are you going to market it. But don't ever, what I don't want people to do is think you can't do it, because when I started, people laughed at me and said to me, Robyn, that's not going to work. Well, now we're having a variety of groups come through. People come now to Boort Caravan Park and stay in the caravan park and do the tours themselves. You know, there's lots of ways how we can get people to the region. And I will say this, there are people sitting in Melbourne that truly believe Swan Hill and Echuca are rural environments. I have had people on bus tours that have said to me, Robyn, I have never, ever been to a rural environment. We thought Echuca and Swan Hill were. And so that's why it's really vital. Think about what you want to do. And if someone does have something out there that they want to do, have a chat with me. And we can see if this is possible. And we can work through it. Okay? What I'd like to do for you is show you a little Loddon Discovery Tours DVD. It goes for 10 minutes. It gives you quite an insight into what we sell into Melbourne and what's going on within the Loddon Shire region.